Okay, this is part of lesson 13. We're now going to start talking about Lumetri scopes and essentials. So you'll want to have the lesson 13 open, and you're going to choose lady walking sequence so you can follow along. And you want to place the playhead over the clip where we can see the lady. Somewhere in here is good. We just want to see a front-facing image of her. Also, one of the other things that we want to talk about is, if you've noticed in Premiere Pro, all your background is this kind of gray tones. And there's actually a reason for this, and it has to do with the color grading and the professionals in this industry. Because if you have other colors on your screen, whites, reds, pinks, blues, whatever they are, when you see those with your eye and you're looking at something else, they can have a direct effect on how you color correct something. So if you're in a professional's color grading suite, they may even have something where they have a gray piece of card laying around. It's pretty big, and they'll look at it before they start color grading. So your eyes will pan away and then pan back to this. It's basically like cleaning your palette, but for your eyes. You're like refreshing your eyes to assess a new set of colors. So that's part of why the interface on this here is gray. I thought that was a kind of cute little insight or neat little piece of information. All right, so we have the sequence open. We see a front view of her. It's going to have us talk more about the scopes panel. So you can see over here, it now wants us to come down here to the settings. We're going to choose that, and the book is asking us to open a preset Premiere 4 scope YUV float with no clamp. So go to presets, and we're going to choose preset vector scope float no clamp. So it's this one. It looks like it's the fourth from the bottom of mine. Hopefully it's the same on yours. So we choose that, and now we have 4 different scopes that we are looking at up in this window, and they will each give us a little bit more insight to our color. One of the things that we also need to specify in the settings is color space. So if you right click in this area, come down here to color space, you can see that there is all these different ones. The book is going to have us choose REC 709. Most of the time when you're working with broadcast television, the 601 or 709 is going to be the color space that you're in. And these can vary again to your cameras and output types. As you get further along, you'll understand those more, or if you have a client for whatever color space you're mixing for. But if you're unsure, you can leave it on automatic or choose 709. The book is telling us 709, so I'm going to go ahead and pick that one. After that, it also has us come down here. This was most likely on 8-bit. It's actually telling us to choose float, and this here has to deal with how many bits of data as far as the color it can display. So 8-bit, I think that was back in the original video game day, but we are able to see a lot more. It's going to have us choose float this time around, and then the bottom one you see HDR. That's high dynamic range. As we get more advanced cameras and they become more readily available, someday you may be working with this, but for right now, this float space is more than enough. And again, it just pay attention to what you're working with, like the type of camera, type of footage you're dealing with. That will help you choose some of these options. It's also wanting us to choose clamp signal, and this constrains the scopes to a standard legal level for broadcast television. Right now it's not going to impact our image results. It's a preference as far as if you want to limit the range of the scopes in this way to see the scales more clearly. So again, this goes back to if you're actually working in broadcast television, if you need to limit stuff in that regards. but the book has us turn it on for this one. Okay, so next up is waveform. It says right click in the panel and choose presets for waveform RGB. So preset waveform RGB. Alright, so we've now changed out of the vector scope that we were originally talking about. You've noticed our 8-bit has come back. We still have clamp on, so that is limiting some of our signal. But it's just trying to walk you through seeing some of these different spaces in the scopes. Alright, the brighter pixels in this one, they show the color saturation of image. The higher it appears on the graph, so these ones up here and all this stuff running across the top. It has their correct horizontal position instead of vertical position, which indicates the brightness. So you can see your blues all kind of run here. We have another set of blues down here along with the yellow, but these run horizontally for us to visually see, and then these numbers on the vertical up and down side of stuff is how intense that stuff is. So it looks like our blue color here is hitting at 178 towards the end. Starts out a little bit lower here at 60. Basically, if you're at 0 down here, there's no luminance on the color itself. So it's not very intense. However, 100 usually is the top. It looks like this one goes further up if we're in RGB. So we are in RGB. It's at 255 right now. Left side represents 100, and you can see the color brightness here on this side. And that means it's fully bright. So this here would be all the colors together. That probably make the white. So you can see that in this one as well. You can view your waveforms in several ways. Open Lumetri scope settings in menu and choose waveform type followed by one of the options. So if we choose waveform type here, you can see we can choose RGB, Luma, YC, or YC with no chroma. Of course, we've talked about RGB before. That is your red, green, and blue pixels in their own color channels. Luma is basically brightness as a luminance value. So your pixels against a scale of -20 to 120 called IRE, which is Institute of Radio Engineers. This allows for precise analysis of bright spots and contrast ratios. So if we check out Luma, it switches, of course, to black and white, and it's talking about the luminance value versus the color. And then let's look at YC. YC is now showing us image luminance, which is brightness in the green, and the chrominance, which is color intensity in the blue. And then if we choose the last one, it switches to all green and just shows us luminance only with no chromance in it. So those are different ways to look at that. All right, so we are going to continue on with this. It's saying using the lady walking sequence, move our playhead to 7 seconds. You can move it physically there, or you can come, of course, and type it here. And that moved us to 7 seconds. Set the waveform to display YC no chroma. So we just did that, and we're on that one. So if you have not choose it here. The smoky part of the image has little contrast and are displayed relatively flat line in the waveform display. So that's probably this or this. It's very flat. It says they're around the middle of the image. So it's this one running across here in the center. This is the flat smoky area that it's talking about. Let's see. It says expand the basic correction section of the Lumetri panel. So come over here, expand basic correction. And it says experiment with exposure, contrast, highlights, shadows, whites, and blackness control. So that's all this stuff here down in tone. And it says as you adjust the controls, watch the waveform display to see the results. So you can see that darkens it. It moves up down the smokiness as we're moving our exposure. Contrast can stretch that out or squish it together. Highlights, shadows if you want to darken some of those. And then you see what whites do and what our blacks do. It makes it a little bit more vivid on the dark stuff. So you can play with each of those and see what you like there. Then it says to scrub through the sequence and see how it looks with your adjustments. She stands out real nice since I moved those blacks. Our smoke still looks nice and smoky. So I think that's probably a good fit for with what I did. And of course, you know, this is viewing it on my monitor. It may look different on yours. You can see what we did to the waveform, how it's different than it was originally. You can come up here and reset all of that and it would go back to the way the waveform was. So if you didn't like what you had, you could put it back. Basically, you're wanting to make sure that your brightness and dark areas in the image are working in the video and have legal levels. That means they're working for your broadcast station. And we should be still good on that because we have it set with the clamp signal to make sure we're not busting that area. Let's see. At any time, if you see perfectly flat horizontal lines of the waveform display, it means there is no visible detail. In the following example, the shadows have been darkened so much that they're flattened at the bottom of the waveform. So you can see down here that I did flatten my shadows probably a little bit more than the book has. And in the book, it talked about setting exposure at 0, contrast at 0, and I can put mine to match this here. But we did slide them so we could see what we were doing. If you type the numbers in and hit tab, it will jump you down to each one as you proceed through. You can also type in negative numbers. All right, so that's what they had, and theirs is really flat now on the where mine was kind of flat, and they pumped their background a lot more. But again, depending on what the feel or the mood is, my more smoky environment might have been more appealing to what I was going for. But this is a reflection of what the book has there at the bottom. And you know, when adjustments are so extreme that details could be lost. So these here bottom ones, we may crush something out that is too far. All right, and then the book says to reset it, and then we'll move on in the next video.